Thank you very much. Yeah, so yeah, as Jeremy was saying, this is my talk basically on how I made the music for the network. I tried to use, well, you'll see as I go through it, I tried to sort of incorporate the sort of philosophy and technologies or the types of philosophy of regarding AI that the network aspires to in the music as well, just as a sort of it's nice to have extra things to guide your music making, and so oftentimes restricting it can lead to interesting outcomes. So who am I? I am a composer and a producer of music for media. I like making music for video games, films, but I also do sort of media marketing, advertisements, really any opportunity to make music, and I'm pretty happy. I'm also a recording engineer for art, like solo artists and bands. I'm a student at the University of Southampton. I'm currently studying music with a focus on, again, composition and production. And I do like science. I don't know if you can see, but on my shelf, I've got a periodic tables thing, and I like to hope that my physics and chemistry A levels haven't completely evaporated from my brain, and I might be able to understand a tiny bit of the other things that have been talked about today. So yeah, so the internship was to create a music package for the network. Basically needed music for introductions to online materials and keynote speeches, and also music to go while people are speaking, perhaps in a video, or also music to go under sort of animations and things that are being played. And throughout the internship, I also had the help of Dr. Drew Crawford, who's a lecturer of music at the university as well, and who also organized and co-composed the piece performed by the Exquisite Corpse of AI that I think was performed at the start of the conference, I believe. So yeah, that was a really, really great experience for me. So with that brief, it's very important to have the same creative vision, like as the person making the music and the person commissioning the music. So we had a meeting, Jeremy, Samantha, and I think Drew as well was there, about what the music should be. And a strong theme that came out of that meeting for me, or one that was very sort of strong in my mind, was this idea of AI and people working together harmoniously, not some sort of dystopian future where robots rule us all, but working together. That was a strong point, and I really wanted to bring that out in the music if possible. So a great way to sort of in real terms talk about what we want the music to sound like is to talk about existing music, right? It means I don't have to go and make loads of things that people don't like, and it means that also people can bring music that they've already heard and say, I want something that sounds like this. So I made a Spotify playlist to use as a sort of sound mood board, so we could start discussing ideas from there. And I'll just play a little bit of what that was possible. So the music here is from Subnautica, which is basically a game about crashing on an alien ocean planet and having to survive with the help of an AI. So I'll just play a bit of that if that's possible.
We're not getting anything at the moment, Mubin. I wondered whether you need to share your sound.
I do need to share my sound. A rookie error.
You need to reshare, because then you need to tick the little box that says sound as well.
1 minute. Does everything look okay? Is everything back to looking
good? Looking good.
Great. Hopefully it's sounding good now too. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, so that was basically one bit of music that there was a lot of positive feedback from, and so I took a lot of ideas from that bit of music. So yeah, I also started finding sounds and instruments. That's sort of where I like to start, is what am I actually using to make the music. And so this is a sort of early attempt at an intro theme. I was, so from that idea of AI and people working together, I wanted to translate that into a musical idea of human or acoustic, sort of like real instruments, basically, working together with synthesized sounds, or very, synthetic synthesized sounds. And so this was basically like an early attempt at doing that. So so I sort of just exploring making lots of different versions of things like this. And also at the same time, I was sort of exploring the technologies I was going to be using. So yeah, this is a fairly early version of a sort of background music while talking. So for that, I used basically an arpeggiator, which is an arpeggiator basically plays a repeated sequence of notes. And this arpeggiator had an option called mutation, which basically adds or subtract notes slightly outside of my control. And basically, but I can change how musically distant those notes are. And so basically, the more mutation there is, the stranger it sounds. And so that was an interesting way of sort of relinquishing some control from me and letting some automated process take control a little bit. And then I also used New School, which is a drum synthesizer based on Conway's Game of Life. Now, I'm sure many of you might know what Conway's Game of Life is, but I'll just explain it. So it's a cellular automated zero-player game. So you draw a pattern on the screen, or you have some initial setup of cells, and how that game progresses is entirely dependent on that initial position. So any cell that has 2 or 3 active cells next to it, or live cells next to it, will live. Any dead cell that has 3 live cells around it will become a live cell, and all other cells will die. And so you get basically patterns or repeating patterns that are like the one here, which is basically a glider generator, which produces these gliders which travel down the screen. And so so this this is a really interesting drum synth. I think I'll zoom in a little bit. So essentially how this works is that on the blue side, you have the initial setup, and then as it goes through, wherever the cells go just determines what drums get played, or what drum sounds get played. And so you get very interesting evolving drum sounds. How do I, there we go. So and it also affects the sort of the sound of each drum, basically. So it's a really interesting way of just setting up something and seeing what happens. So and it's a lot of fun to just sort of play around with it. And I thought it was a nice link to the sort of the goals of what I was doing. And then iterating on those ideas. So the first idea is never very good in music, or very, very rarely is it very good. I didn't particularly like that first intro that I came up with. And so, that's absolutely essential to do. So I jumped the gun a bit and played that a bit earlier, but that was basically a newer version of that original one that I came up with. And you can tell there that I'm sort of finding my way while iterating. I'm finding what works, what doesn't work, and still exploring with new ideas as well. Just sometimes starting completely from scratch and coming up with something new. So and at this point as well, I had a lot of places to draw inspiration from. So we'd been having lots of talks about. I was submitting stuff. We were sort of finding new bits of music, and so. And so I came up with that. And I thought that was pretty good at that point. I was like, yeah, I think this is the one. But at that point also, then you need to finalize the music. So I gave that to Drew, and he also sort of agreed that's a good idea, but it needs a bit more. And so yeah, it just needed improvements, polish, making that yeah, just polishing it essentially. Yeah. And so I also came up with a different version of that background loop, which I thought was slightly more complex and sort of more interesting to listen to, which is this. And then, yeah, so another way in which AI sort of helped me create this music is iZotope's Ozone. So iZotope is a music production company. They make a lot of great tools, and they've really incorporated AI into all their products as much as they can. So mastering is a pretty nuanced stage of music production. It's, to a lot of mixing people, it's sort of magic, but essentially what they do is they just increase the volume while bringing out the best aspects of the music in a way that we can't. I'm not really sure, but basically this AI can you just sort of tell it what you want a little bit, and it will be, sorry, I just got distracted by something there. Yeah, it will sort of put you in the right direction. A mixing engineer, a proper mastering engineer will be better than this AI. But for someone like me who doesn't know what mastering really is, it can really help. And so with this, and with also the sort of additional improvements I made, I came up with this as the final version for the introduction. Which I really like. And what's interesting is a lot of my favorite bits about that only came right at the end. So for example, that sort of sliding bass part that becomes pretty intense near the end is probably one of my favorite bits of that. And that was a fairly last minute thing that I added. And it's interesting to see how, like, yeah, the way that you get to something like that, it's not really through like inspiration or something amazing happening and it's all there in my head at the start. It's really through iterating and through trying stuff out that you get to a good piece of music, a good finished bit of music. I didn't know how long basically this talk was going to last for me, so I sort of added some bits here for me to talk about the future of music and AI. I'll say a little bit, which is basically like there's a lot of worry about AI taking over art and taking over music. And while I can like see where the worry comes from, for me, art is like an inherently human activity that AI might be able to create music or create copies of music as like a product to replace sort of background music or things like that. But it will never create something that will like push art forward as a medium. Where AI is used in art, it will be used as a tool, and the sort of artistic impetus will come from people. So yeah, thank you for that talk, and thanks for the chance to speak, and here are my details.